All right, hello UFS community. I figured I should do. I figured I greatly enjoyed this Ermac deck I played in UK teams, and I want to share it with the world. So let's give it a shot. I'm here with my awesome UK Talk Fest playmat. You can't quite see the part that says I'm a UK national finalist, but Anyway, uh, it's a sweet riding mat. I played Ermac. This is a very unique character in the Mortal Kombat set, and I have a backing Kevin Broberg behind my card. Uh, Basically, the kind of the core of what he does is that he asks you to check character cards. When you check a character card, you can trade a foundation with your opponent. So you stack one of yours, and you have to stack one of theirs. Um, this It's kind of mundane. I mean, it doesn't sound that great. You don't want to have a deck full of characters. He also has a second ability where you can pitch characters that clog up your hand for damage. But really, the core here is that top ability to put your opponent to kind of just trade resources with the opponent and come out ahead because you can keep getting more and more resources. And then what ended up happening was that my opponents ended up having 0 foundations. This deck isn't actually the best at closing the game out the way it's built right now. Um, but the joke that I've started telling is that if your opponent doesn't want to die, they can probably live. And so your mission is then to make them want to die, to make them not want to live anymore. And then you can finally put them away. So the core of this deck, the most important cards, I don't know what I'm going to do with this, uh, are this little slam package. 4 copies of Nutcracker with a K. It's Cassie's. Let's see what's got here. 4 copies of Cassie's Nutcracker, 4 copies of Mayfa's Assault, and 4 copies of Transform. I will cram down to the middle of this thing. So what all these have in common, so Transform has a lot of text. What's important about it is that it adds a 4 difficulty slam from your discard pile to your hand, and then it when you play that slam next, it adds stuff to your staging area. So you play a Transform, you check a 3, you add a Mayfa's Assault save from your discard pile to your hand, you play the Mayfa's, you check a 5, and then this becomes a foundation. And that's kind of the big key. So both these slams, Mayfa's and Nutcracker, have abilities that draw you a card. And so on top of that, they also can deal a lot of damage, but Nutcracker draws a random card. It can deal 8 damage. It has Breaker 2. It's awesome. It's really, really fantastic for this deck. But then Mayfa's adds specifically the top card of your discard pile to your hand. So if we go back to Ermac, what you can do is if you have a perfect character, if you have a character that shares 3 symbols with your opponent, you can pitch that and then Mayfa's it back for your next stack to get +6 as well. But often what you end up doing is making a whole bunch of control checks, and selecting the best card out of those checks. And also, a cute trick is that if you have a transform in your staging area that you transform for a Mayfa's, and you can flip a 6, you can flip a buddy block, you can respond with Ermac to put this transform on top of your discard. You can set to destroy this and have it on top of your discard pile, and then Mayfa's can pick it up. And then you can replay it, and you can go get another Mayfa's, and with luck, you can hit a 6. Like if you hard check a 6 on this Mayfa's, hard check a buddy block on this Mayfa's. Oh, well that triggers Ermac. Stack this transform again. Oh, you on Mayfa's, pick it back up. And that sequence is really, really powerful. It puts you very far ahead. It gives you, it takes away a lot of your opponent's cards, and it's very, very powerful. Nutcracker is a little swingier. If your opponent's a male, this thing does an absolute boatload of damage. But also another thing that makes it swingy is that it only draws you a card if you have a copy of one of the next 4 cards I'm going to bring out here. Right, wrong file. Sense of Morals, which doesn't have to progress particularly what's in your card pool, and it has a 4+ to make a control check. You will, with this deck, so because Ermac rewards you for checking a character, the motivation of this deck is to have as many ways to make control checks, often for no reason as possible. So I have untapped a foundation with the Sense of Morals. I'm not sure if I've ever untapped foundation with the Sense of Morals, but I've played Sense of Morals Enhanced on virtually every enhanced set that I've ever been part of when this has been in my staging area. There have been some interesting decisions about when you want to sacrifice a Sense of Morals. or if you'd rather keep it in your staging area to keep 4+ing. There end up being a lot of kind of fine-grained choices. But Sense of Morals is an absolutely key card, and the other key card, sort of like the 20 cards that I consider the core of this deck are the 4 transforms, the 4 Mephas. Let's just take this off the screen here for a sec. 4 Mephas, 4 Nutcrackers, 4 Sense of Morals, and then 4 of the next card. Pretty Lux. Gaining Ground. Over here. Gaining Ground. And this says when you check it, you add it to your staging area. This is not on symbol with the rest of the deck. It's a death card. It does chain with Ermac, but you can, like, quote, normally play it. But a lot of the cards, including all 8 of the attacks I just showed you, do not chain with Gaining Ground. But because you're playing so many cards that make control checks, you just want to burn these control checks. This ends up entering your staging area a lot, and then Ermac immediately trades it away. This is always the first card, almost always the first card you destroy. Sometimes if you're going to play Nutcracker, you might destroy Sense of Morals first. But Gaining Ground is the #1 priority sacrifice target, and it's a huge part of what makes this deck work. Is just the free foundations from Gaining Ground. Moving on, just to get everyone on the same page, this deck does play a whole bunch of buddy blocks. I had 11 in total. There's a couple cute things you can do in here. I played a couple off-symbol characters, so the characters I can't block with. Spike, I guess I could technically block with, and Hikaru can't block with at all. Everyone else has the all symbol, and so I'm able to block with them. One of the cute little one of the cute things you can do is play additional copies of Ermac himself, and then you get access to a foundation called Radical Edward. And Radical Edward says when you check it, I'll pull this up for you all. You get to add a character that it has the same name as your starting character to your hand. So you can see this has been graffitied down a little bit. Pick up a dude. So I'll show it to you right side up. And so that's a cute little thing. Now all of a sudden, all these Sense of Morals checks, all these whatever checks, can now suddenly turn into draw a +0 mid block, which then Ermac can say draw a random card if you really need to. I felt like 11 was a pretty reasonable number. I had a few more at one point, but this is a Type 59 card deck because we want to draw our core cards, our Mephas Assaults, our Nutcrackers, our Senses of Morals as often as physically possible. I play 1x of all the rest of the characters. I don't even really have a good procedure on how to pick the optimal distribution here, but I did know that I wanted Spike because he gives me 2 symbols against Liu Kang and against Quan Chi and against either Spike, Spike 1 or Spike 2, and I felt like those were characters that I was fairly likely to see, fairly powerful characters, and no one else could give me 2 symbols while chaining all to any of those characters actually. Shinnok gives me Death and Evil, so that's 2 symbols like Quan Chi, but I like the coverage from Spike, and Hikaru just has 4 symbols, and you just gotta, a lot of times, there's 12 symbols in the game, and so if you pick 3 random symbols, you end up, it's not unlikely that you can share 0 with your opponent on a given character card, and so just the fact that, like, Hikaru usually is good for 2, and if Hikaru isn't, then someone else is probably going to be good for 4. I think I made a conscious effort to avoid any characters with double elemental resource symbols to share with Hikaru. But I think my procedure there is pretty primitive. I think there's definitely sort of room to grow over what I played, but I'm not quite inclined enough to figure that out personally. I guess I'll show you the rest of my attacks next. This deck actually played only 13 attacks, like 13 orange cards, because I can't transform as an attack when I built the deck. So effectively I had 17 attacks. So the rest of the attacks are 1 copy of Beast Cannon, and this is a nice little transform target and a nice little thing to help lube up a long attack string that involves like multiple Nutcrackers and multiple Mephas Assaults. Just giving your next land -2 difficulty really helps a lot, and also this just is a 9th card you can transform for, so that your turn 2 transform draws are more and more likely to have something defined. As a first form, it also, in terms of just putting pressure on your opponent and making them have blocks and worry about blocking at the same time as they're worrying about building their staging area to resist Ermac's response, stone raining them. Um, Stone Rain being a magic card that destroys target land, for the record. If you're not familiar with that slang, it basically just means taking away your opponent's resources they use to play the game, which is what this deck is all about. But so Beast Cannon is just a cheap attack, and it can draw a card. It's a fine filler. I put it in sort of last minute. I think I would consider playing more of them on a future iteration. Um, and I think one thing I didn't mention about Nutcracker Mayfly Assault is that they're both low attacks, and some people are cheating on those. And one of my favorite things to do in the game of UFS is to zone mix up people. So my next two attacks are Leaping Neck Chomp. But Kevin, you might say, I've played a whole bunch of Eta 9, and this says Combo Ally. None of your attacks you're talking about so much right now have Ally. You know what card does, though? It's my favorite, Sense of Morals. So Nutcracker into Leaping Neck Chomp is effectively a combo. And even if it's not, Leaping Neck Chomp lets you add a character card from your discard pile to your hand. All the characters have 6 checks, and that means you can always add the best character you've found so far. So this is basically damage floor at 8, assuming Ermac is available for it. And if you can combo it, it's very commonly 14 damage. Even if you don't discard like the character you find with it, no one says you have to do that. You can discard an egotistical or something. So this is a very kind of high impact piece. It's the only high attack in the deck. It's the only if they play for a little while, they get very leery of holding high blocks because those don't let you block 8 damage Nutcrackers, Fat Mavis assaults, and so this can kind of the hope is that you can catch people sleeping with this card, and it just is kind of abstractly a whole lot of damage, a whole lot of output. So I thought it was valuable for that. I have to figure out how I'm organizing my desk here. Because I sure did misplace the next 2 cards I was going to talk about. Here, there. And then finally, I have 2 copies of Soul Charge. And this is an absolute murder machine. So this card effectively has a base damage of however many 6 checks you have in your discard pile plus 5. And if you can hit that 6+ on the card, it becomes a 6-speed mid that's based at 7 damage, and it also has powerful 2 on top of that. So anytime if you've been chip-shotting them with Nutcrackers or Mayflies earlier in the game, now this thing basically is a one-shot kill. It's really important to be able to put away kind of higher vitality characters, especially female ones. My match that I ultimately my team ended up getting 3-0'd, but this match in which I got eliminated from the tournament was against Jackie Briggs, and Soul Charge actually wasn't even enough to put her away. I had to Soul Charge her twice, basically, to win those games. Once kind of on the early turns to put her in like desperation, like low vitality range, and then I just kept playing footsie, kept chip-shotting her, and she kept blocking, so I eventually had to find the second one after she opened up, blocking all the rest of the stuff. But this is kind of there is certainly a world where you can build your deck with 4 copies of this card and kind of have plan A, B. I'm going to Soul Charge you. I'm going to win every game with Soul Charge. But I thought it would be this is a 5 difficulty 3-speed mid. And if we want to push through damage, if we want to get incremental, this doesn't really get an incremental advantage. And if we want to push through damage, it's very poor for that. It's higher difficulty. So I preferred to focus on the cheaper slams. So that's the entire attack lineup. Is those the 8 core slams, the 1 beast cannon, and then 2 each of the mix-ups. On the sideboard, I also had 2 copies of Stink Gas, which is mainly to answer things that shut down Transform. It's a targeted piece of board hate, and I know a lot of people have been playing Ermac with like 4 Stink Gases and more, completely different attack lineups, and I think those are totally legit, but I wanted to focus on sort of the incremental advantage, drawing cards, keeping things moving kind of game, than trying to just stack with 6s or whatever. So on to the rest of my foundation base. I think one of the absolute cores of the deck it's Ermac support. So I've got 4 Serving the Outworld. I've got 2 copies of We Are Many, You Are But One. And then these are both 6 checks, so they're great. They help you pass 6 checks, play difficult cards, all that good stuff. But then rewarding you for playing all these 6 checks is Telekinetic Mastery. And I played 3 copies of this main deck with a 4th in the sideboard. This was kind of my team talked about playing four of these, excuse me, four copies of this main, and I backed out of that at the last second to kind of make room, get down to 59 cards. But Telekinetic Mastery is an absurdly powerful card. It is the best payoff for playing a lot of six checks in your deck, because so many people, so many decks these days, so many cards, so many strategies are centered around small incremental damage pumps. This card I've actually played against Scorpion decks that give +6 damage, and because of Telekinetic Mastery, their offense was too limp to kill me all of a sudden. Like I would play one block, and they'd paid 15 life that turn, and I would live, just because they +6, and then I get 2 responses, and now it's a +2, and then if they want to +2 speed, well, they can do that, but they might lose 4 more damage on top of all that. Sometimes you can check a 5 and choose to commit to pass this. That's fine. But on top of all that, it's also discard 8. So if they're, I played against Reptile in this tournament, and Reptile had a terrible time. This card just ruins him. Serving that world is a really nice damage pump. Crucially, it lets you play. It's kind of like the three things. This card does 3 things on the board. First, it's 6+, so that gives you more chances to flip a character for Ermac and start destroying opponent's staging unit. Second, 4 things, I guess, really. It gives more damage to all of your attacks. You check those 6s, and these random 3 level 4 Mayfist assaults aren't getting anyone dead until you start putting all this free damage on them. Damage reduction also important, and also canceling forms. In the mirror match, transform is a form, so it's a huge liability all of a sudden to even have in your deck. But also against fatality decks, they often are centered around Surveyor. This cancels those, does a lot of good stuff, and possibly one of the MVPs of the deck is this We Are Men, You Are But One. I would consider playing. I would certainly play the 3rd copy of this in the sideboard. I would consider playing 3 main. I would consider having 4 available after sideboard. It's incredibly good. Even though it's unique, you can always cash it in to double up on Ermac's response and destroy 2 of your opponent's foundations. Destroying momentum, just denying momentum on that 6+. That's clutch as hell in this format. Like everyone is building decks that spend momentum, and like you're taking it away for less than free when you can check those 6s. This deck is happy to play Sense of Morals just for the sake of making a control check. Now you're doing that and also taking away a resource. And plus, if you have ways to fuel Ermac's Enhance, this basically gives you 2 more damage on every attack. If your opponent's character doesn't have all, most of the characters in this deck do, so that's 2 damage on all of them. And if not, you can usually find something that'll at least chain once or twice between the characters you have available, and then you can also just give them water or something, discard Spike. Oh, now it's +4, and then you get Spike back with Leaping Neck Jump or whatever. Very, very useful card. And also checks a 6, which for this deck, it's really these cards that care about checking 6s. Other decks, I'm not playing any copies of Soul Ball or Max Own Attack that has 3 enhances that are 6+. I just didn't find it reliable, or it feels really bad when you check a 3 on any of that. But these 6 checks are still very much worth it. Another actually 6-check theme card that I'm playing 3 copies of is Mushroom Experimentation. And if we're talking about incremental advantages here, this is a big one. This basically says you can just dump your hand with Reckless Abandon and then bail yourself out by discarding 2 cards and drawing 2 cards. If you have 0 cards in your hand, you just draw 2. And that's fantastic. It also, playing a lot of 6s, this turns into effectively a sweet nothings. You have to discard a card and destroy this, but then you 0 out your opponent's attack, or very close to that. Which you don't do it often, you don't do it early, but it's a very powerful resource to have in your back pocket, especially because your opponents are going to be very constrained on resources trying to kill you, and this can shut down like an Illurophobia, Gateway Shuffle kind of string. That's the best way to get out of, the best way to score a kill with that one when low on resources. I'm playing 3 spammy 6 checks, only 3, Egotistical and 2 Fallen Masters. I kind of hate these like super low impact cards, but it's important to be able to pass control checks on early turns, and these are useful incremental advancements. The high block on Fallen Master is very important to have access to, although I think that mid blocks in this metagame are more important than ever, which is why I'm happy to be playing a deck with 11 character cards in it. I mean, I guess 9, so 9 plus 0 mids on top of, you know, Nutcracker plus 2 breaker 2s and all that other good stuff. But, these are pretty unremarkable. You end up sacrificing them relatively often, but it just gives you a little bit more durability, and that's always nice to have. And finally, finally, as far as 6 checks go, I have 2 of my favorite cards in the game. The whole history of the universe, in fact, Hanya. And when your opponent has 0 cards in play and you have a Hanya, boy, it feels good, because if they attack you, they're going to have a really, really bad time. This basically just kind of augments the resource denial plan, making it so that if you're you take away your opponent's foundations and you make all their cards more difficult, and kind of the hope is that they won't be able to do anything and they'll just be locked out of the game. It's pretty straightforward, kind of self-explanatory. One thing I did consider off this deck was copies of Sagaki Offering or other things to be able to ready my Hanyas, but those just didn't really materialize. And also, it's not worth kind of mentioning, I guess, that this does help you push through attacks on offense if you're trying to push through for that kill. +1 speed isn't a lot, which is effectively what this is. +1 speed all of your attacks after your first attack deals damage. But every point counts when it comes to landing these attacks at printed 4 speed. And so finally, I've got a small little suite of 5-check foundations. And these slots were extra tight because I wanted to be playing as many 6s as possible to make all my 6-check stuff work. And just this deck is only playing 29 foundations because playing so many character cards and so many foundations. It's really kind of 25 foundations because gaining ground, I treat that as an action slot. I should bring up Hanya if you haven't seen it before. But so first up, we have Season Guide. I guess first up, I already mentioned Radical Edward, so that's one of them. But Season Guide, this is just kind of more copies of Sense of Morals, effectively. It can be really clutch when you have to be able to look at the top card of your deck, and then if it's, for example, if it's a 6-check, then you can choose to Serving the Outworld and flip it immediately. Or if you have a card draw in hand, so like on Beast Cannon or on Nutcracker, you can use that to prioritize the top card right then, or otherwise clear it away with one of the many control check cards, and then find out what it is. I only played 2. This was a 0 testing late edition. It played fine. It wasn't incredible. It was nice that on turn 1, if I drew the deck's turn 1 builds are atrocious. A lot of the time, you mulligan pretty regularly, and often you end up playing attacks on 1 anyway, just because you got to spend your cards somehow, and if you can get lucky and check a 5, check a 6, that can give you a lot of advantage. I know in one game of testing, I kind of threw my hand on the table and said, "Oh God, what do you think I should do?" We realized I could play 2 foundations, then transform for a Maphis Assault, and play the Maphis on a 7, commit my character. If I check a 6, commit my character. And what ended up happening was I hit the 6, and I checked a Fallen Master, picked up the Fallen Master with Maphis Assault, and then built the Fallen Master. So I got a turn 1 with 4 foundations and some damage on the board. And yeah, anyway, this can kind of make those more possible. I think you could certainly just play the full play set, but you'd have to be cutting cards with more text, and I'm not a fan of having a deck full of cards with no text on them. So in terms of cards that do have text, we have Fusion of Souls, which is quietly, I think, one of the MVPs of Ermac. But once again, I guess this is another Ermac support card, so I should have brought it up with the other ones. This is another 5-check that has a 6+ cost on it, but what you get out of it is you get to choose the best character in your discard pile for damage output and put it in your hand. So this can give you a lot more +4s. In the right matchups, it can give you +6s, and that's a really powerful swing to have access to. And plus, it just puts you up a card, and I think the theme of this deck is being up a card, being up these small incremental advantages, and then converting them into bigger advantages down the line. And finally, the piece de resistance. I have 1 copy of Hi-Fi Stereo. There are only 8 cards that trigger this in this deck during the combat phase, which are Gaining Ground and Transform. So it's a little bit swingy that way. But when this is online, it helps you push through damage, and it kind of forces your opponent to rely on the top of their deck. This also does trigger during your own end step when you're clearing your card pool, and that means that you can just kind of put pressure on your opponent's hand. You can attack. You can slap them with some pokes. If they're playing blocks, they end up on 0 cards in their hand, and let's say they're holding one last card. They're holding a windmill punch. They're holding a critical split. They're holding Avenge the Fallen Angel, and then you say, "Oh, Hi-Fi Stereo response. Please discard your last card." Now you're living completely off the top of your deck. You don't have any foundations in play. You're just miserable, and that's kind of the goal with this card. Just making your opponent's card quality worse. Um, and that's it for the main deck. On the sideboard, this sideboard is a little bit kind of hacky thrown together. I've got a little bit more of the Ermac Radical Edward package. I can side up to 2 Radical Edwards and 3 Ermacs. You do need to have an Ermac in your discard pile for Radical Edward to do anything. This also is a little bit more hate if they have like uniques or whatever, but doesn't really. It didn't really pay off that much. And also, they can, if you have a Radical Edward in play, they can just sacrifice their thing. It's pretty marginal. You could just main deck it too, I guess. Um, I've got 2 copies of Stink Gas that I already mentioned. This is, once again, primarily for the sake of taking cards like For Mother Russia or Serving the Outworld off the table on your opponent's side. The adding a 6-check card to your staging area happens almost never because you only have 2 more or I guess if you have a Stink Gas, both Stink Gases in your deck, you have to hold 3 attacks in your deck that can trigger that, but it's probably pretty cool if it happens. Yeah, not too much to say there. I've got 2 copies of Novitiate. I guess actually, so on Stink Gas, I'm going to bring this back out. I played this in teams because my team would be able to pair me away from the things that I would need Stink Gas against. Maybe in singles you would have to play this main just because it'd be too devastating to get your transforms canceled for so cheap as they can get canceled these days. Yeah, I think one card that is less devastating is Venomous, which is the new card red-handed effectively, but because it does sacrifice itself to cancel, you're kind of getting paid anyway. Your goal is to put pressure in everyone's staging area, trade for them, trade 1-for-1 with them when you can't trade, incidentally as part of your 3-for-1 with like Omnibus Assault or whatever. So you don't feel too bad about trading that for an action card. But Stink Gas trading for a 4 Mother Russia or a yeah. Anyway, it's much better to take those cards off the board permanently. Novitiate is the next one. This was kind of a hedge against the Quan Chi type decks or Super Wally things with lots of like the life gain Pillow Fort type stuff. If you've like talked about Anachrus or Keith these bro decks that are just playing all the life gain in the universe, this was to try to help push through those and also to prevent people from drawing a million cards on defense. But actually, I would probably never be able to do that bottom enhance because it would shut off my own Nutcrackers and Mapas and everything and transforms. So yeah, this is just for DR. Never, I don't think I actually ever set it in, and that's probably good because I don't know if it would even be very effective. And then I've got a 4th Delconnect Mastery. This came in a lot over the course of the weekend. I would try to find room for a main, but the main is full of great cards and 6-jacks, and you don't want to go down too much on great cards or 6-jacks. And there is kind of diminishing returns once you have like 3 of these in play. Your opponent can just stop playing those enhances, and then they do a lot less. I know I ultimately died when I had double Telekinetic Mastery in play, but I had to commit one of them past control check, and then my opponent played an Iron Knuckle, powerful 6'd it with 3 momentum, or 3 total cards. So I got my 1 TK Mastery response, and then I checked a 3, and then I checked a 3 on the block too. If he had previously in the tournament in the match, he had he had a similar situation, powerful on it, walked into a bunch of TK Masteries, then done the enhance on the card, +1 speed, +1 damage, and had a very bad time because +1 speed is one instruction which triggers TK Mastery, and then +1 damage is another one. So that triggers. I got 2 triggers of each of my 2 TK Masteries on that, and he ended up losing. I think he only lost 3 damage total from that sequence, but losing 3 damage when you wanted to get +1 is pretty bad beating. And finally, I have 1 copy of Wave of True Warrior. This is a great card, I think, an underrated card in the format. There's a lot of people running around with combos and throws and whatever, all kinds of nonsense. and this is just a little bit more to supplement all of the starting the outworld, Fallen Master, Mushroom Experimentation, damage reduction by sort of trying to take away a high impact ability from my opponent's cards. Plus, it flips, so I can then sacrifice it to Ermac later, rather than a card like, excuse me, compared to a card like High Seas Adventure, which takes away all the abilities, all the stuff you do in the enhanced step, but it also removes itself from the game. So that's my Ermac deck. I think I definitely know that I saw the what did he call it? The Slam. It wasn't the Slammiversary, but Slam was hosting an event, and there was a bunch of Ermac matches on stream with radically different Ermac decks from this one. And I think it's really cool to see sort of this offbeat character still has enough depth that there isn't just one way to do him. Um, I hope you enjoyed that. I hope you enjoyed this, and hope you check it out. Play around with it a little bit yourself. It's really sort of a deep experience, playing just for incremental advantage and trying to figure out how to win games while making your opponent suffer, rather than just sort of doing a Liu Kang like push for infinite speed and damage and call your opponent's card pool and then count to potato infinite damage on them, or like a Quan Chi kind of kill. It's a different flavor of UFS, anyways. The point I'm making. Um, and yeah, I hope you check it out and enjoy. Thanks for watching.